these thoughts are sort of being pumped out by the four centers. And again, center of gravity. One person's center of gravity is constantly pumping a certain type of thought or energy that becomes thought, that becomes feeling. It's a particular kind of like a chemical dye, and it's just pumping, and it goes into the bloodstream, you could say, and into our brain, and then it turns into what, at best, even though we don't really understand it, we can call a thought. Our outlook as a human being without awareness, conscious as itself, starts to take a certain psychological form. We can notice that these thoughts come by themselves, and they come out of our centers, and then they take the shape of the feeling of I. And by the time that's happened, we're already pretty lost. Awareness is pretty much out of focus. A thought comes along like a cloud or a bird flying across the sky, and we latch onto that. Where's it come from? You can derive meaning from the fact that it came from one of the centers. And then that's a way to help you be less identified with it. My teacher used to say that, oddly enough, reality is a foreign experience for most of us, for most people. Reality is a foreign experience, and when we're faced with just presence, awareness, we don't know what to do. Trusting this silence of being in ourselves, we don't trust it. When you come out of imagination, why can't you just trust that inner being that is silent and still in yourself, which is what you really are? But it's foreign to us. The reality of what we are is foreign. Because we're so accustomed to imagination and identification as a feeling of who we are, that's a feeling of identity, and you called it an addiction. Yes, we're all addicted to our ego, to our, I should say, our sense of ourself as the ego. You could say we're all addicted to that. Something to consider is that there is as much space inside us as there is outside. We usually feel we're so confined and everything's so packed in tight, and we're right up against all these thoughts and emotions and feelings and obligations and problems and it seems so crowded in here because we're identified. Awareness is identified, and because this imagination is so prolific. But as we pull away internally, you see, ironically, we're not trying to necessarily be less identified with what is outside of us, even though we start that way and try it. In right order, we start from the inside out. If we could be less identified with what is in us and what's happening inside, then the same thing would start to happen outside. There's all this space, there's this enormous panorama inside, and we can back away from the imagination, and not only just be then on the, as I was saying, on the bank, the river bank, we can then go even farther back. We can go deep back away from that stream into the woods or onto a mountain or into a big valley. We can go way, there's enormous space inside our being. And of course, this is a different dimension. I'm not talking about inside the skull, the human skull. I'm talking about this dimension, internal dimension of being. It is as vast as what's outside. I'm not sure they're very different. I'm not sure they are different. We don't know much about the outside universe. Again, science has done a lot. Can measure these long distances. There's so much that's unknown about the external universe. And likewise, there's so much unknown about the internal universe. But there's all this space, but we become prisoner of a little corner of our being inside. and don't realize we don't have to be. We can let go.